Bruce Robinson, and I've got an interesting subject to talk about: inspiration. And I'm going to take you to the Himalayas to think about this. And there are two events that happen in the Himalayas that are important for me when it comes to inspiration. The first one happened when I was a medical student. I had a job lined up and a new girlfriend, and a couple of mentors thought I should go to the third world and see medicine practiced in poor countries. And so they organized for me to go to a hospital in the Himalayas. I've got to be honest, I did not want to go. But these were two mentors in the medical school, and they actually raised the money for the travel and for staying there because we're quite a poor family, and they basically organised the whole thing. I couldn't say no. And that visit changed my life. I ended up, hadn't even been outside of Western Australia. Went to Calcutta, saw the poverty, went right out into Western Nepal to a place called Tansen in the Himalayas. And on the one hand it was a shock, but on the other hand it made such a difference to my life. I did a number of village trips where we went out on public health visits, slept on the ground, met people in dire poverty but with such smiles. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. But I'd like to tell you about one incident really that embodies why this changed my life. After a month or a bit more there, I watched these doctors looking after the poor patients, just coming in their hundreds every day with tuberculosis, tetanus and rabies sometimes. And very inspiring to watch. And two in particular I'd like to mention. One, Rob Ferguson from England. He had a postgraduate qualification, was there with his wife Ros and two kids. And another one from the United States, from Johns Hopkins, Dick Harding, also with a postgraduate qualification with his wife Sue and their kids, living really in poor conditions. So I said to them one day, guys, can I just say something? I'm very impressed and inspired by what you're doing. How hard you work for these poor people. And I know, because I'm a medical student, how much money you could be earning back in England and in the United States. And then I said something which was really telling. I said, but I guess at least you have the gratitude of the poor. And they looked at each other, and then they looked at me, and they said, actually, it doesn't work like that. We charge them the equivalent of 2 cents a day just so that we don't remove their dignity and they don't feel like they're getting charity. And they think we've come from London and Baltimore to make money out of them. You don't do this sort of thing for the gratitude of the poor. You do it because it's the right thing to do. What a telling moment in my life, up there in the Himalayas. I've never forgotten it. I'd like to tell you now about a second Himalaya story. It's not about someone I've ever met, but someone who's one of my heroes. It is Sir Edmund Hillary, the late Sir Edmund Hillary. He, with the Sherpa Tenzing Norgay, were the first to climb Mount Everest in 1953. And for that alone, he is considered a hero. But it is not for that that I consider him one of my heroes and one of my inspirations. There are three other reasons. The first is that when he came down off the mountain, he noticed that the Sherpa people in eastern Nepal were very poor and needed help. So he spent the rest of his life raising money and actually going to their area and building schools and hospitals and bridges and roads, and dedicated his life to helping these poor people. He turned his success into helping other people. That's an inspiration. Secondly, in the process, he involved his family. He took his wife and all of his children up there, and actually this had three massive advantages. One is they weren't sitting at home playing Nintendo or going to time zone. They were actually in the outdoors, being inspired by nature. He also taught them values by helping poor people instead of, I guess, being egocentric. And thirdly, he created wonderful family bonding time when they were there. And interestingly, I interviewed his son Peter, who's also climbed Everest a couple of times, about this. And he's also a wonderful guy who loves nature, obviously. He asked his father, after he and I had spoken, whether his dad had done this by intention. His dad said, "Oh, no, I don't think I was a great dad. I just kind of did it." The same with his care for the poor. "Oh, I'm not a I'm not a do-gooder. I'm just, it's obvious. They need some help, and so you respond." But there's now a third reason why this is inspiring, and that is because in the process of helping the poor and going there with his family, he lost his wife and one of his daughters in a plane crash. The plane took off from Kathmandu, there was a problem, it crashed in a ball of flame, and they died instantly. This was a terrible tragedy, obviously, for him. It cut him deeply, and it took him years before he could even talk about it. But it didn't stop him working. He continued to work. I mean, you could imagine him saying, "Well, you know what, I've given up enough time and energy and now my family for this. I've done enough." But he didn't. And his family continue on with the legacy. So, I don't know, there's something about these two Himalayan stories that's very important to me. My visit to Nepal when I was a student changed my life. It changed my attitude towards care for the poor. It's affected my own medical career in terms of what I do, affected it massively in terms of what I do. And honestly, but for those mentors taking the initiative, I don't think I would be the same person. I mean, I'm pretty selfish anyway, I think, and quite driven, but I think I'd be maybe more selfish and driven in different ways. So I'm grateful for those mentors. I am grateful for that moment in the Himalayas when these two doctors said, "You don't do things for gratitude, you do it because it's the right thing to do."